Okay, I would like to call to order this meeting. And Monique, if you would proceed with the roll call, please.
Yes. Mark Mansell,
Here.
John Fernandez,
Present.
Renee Hoiser,
Here.
and we know that Lauren Shedd is not present.
Okay, so that does give us a quorum. So does anybody have any proposed agenda adjustments? Okay, Monique, have we had any requests to address the trust?
No, we haven't had any public comments made for the trust today.
Okay, so the next item is to approve the minutes from the January 22nd trust meeting. I'm looking for a motion and a second to approve the meeting minutes.
I move that we approve the meetings from the prior EBT meeting.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 Okay, motion's passed. And the next agenda item is the monthly experience report. And do we have anybody from Valley to do that? I don't.
Jameson's not on yet, so it'll just be a few minutes. Could we move on with the next item? And
You bet, that would be great. So the
Appreciate it.
next item is the Healthcare Task Force. And I think Dr. Shaw is going to talk about that.
Yeah, absolutely. Thanks, Mark, and thanks everyone for your time this evening. So this came out of a lot of conversations from folks in terms of how to make sure we have input into some of the process as we're making, hopefully will be some fundamental changes. I think I mentioned a last meeting, last EBT meeting a few weeks ago, how we've had some conversations, and some of you have been in those conversations with Elria, with P3 community partners and some others to really look and think outside the box of traditional fee-for-service healthcare into a more capitated patient population accountable care model that will hopefully focus on cost savings and improve outcomes and satisfaction for our employees that are utilizing the insurance to try to mitigate some of the costs and some of the sick care that we're providing. Nothing might change. It might be a lot of great conversations without anybody willing to and ready to do something new. But I think we're at a point where we'll be looking at some options and getting input from those most effective, namely our employees and our employee groups, is going to be important as we vet some potential dramatic changes to how we provide health benefits in the future. And so what this task force hopes to do is not at all replace the work of the EBT, not to replicate the work or do anything EBT is doing, but instead to, first of all, fulfill the bargaining agreement requirement of having a healthcare a group that's working with TEA members and other bargaining unit members along with administration to look at health insurance. So fulfill our already contractual agreement with the unions, as well as getting staff input onto potential projects and things related to our health insurance benefits in the future. So things like these accountable care organizations that might limit networks and reduce costs, hopefully, and improve better care. That would be the goal, but getting some input to see, is the cost savings worth the limited networks? How is this going to affect people on the ground? How is it going to affect potential family members coming into and out of the insurance network? So that's what this healthcare task force is looking to do, getting input from frontline staff, from our unions, and to changes, getting feedback and getting buy-in for potential changes down the road in the years to come.
Sounds great.
John, Ricky, is there anything? I know, John, you've been involved in some of these conversations.
Yeah. Well, I just wanted to, I know I sent Dr. Shaw, I sent you the snippet from the collective bargaining agreement with TEA regarding an insurance committee. And I told you we would give it more thought as to how those would work together or in tandem or in place of each other. Have you given that any thought as well?
Well, I would think this would fulfill that requirement in the bargaining contract. I think I've met with the union president as well as the AEA Southern Arizona lead in December to kind of just vet some ideas and see, you know, what their interest was on doing something like this. And they both look at the proposal and they're both happy with this moving forward.
Yeah, so I think we can work through that and, you know, make that happen. But there are actually going to be two committees, and I just want to make that clear. One is kind of a task force representing the employee groups and stakeholders. But there's also another task force, and I wanted to just clarify that these are not the same, which is the one that would be participating in the RFP process. Or at least let me just lay that out there and, you know, kind of make sure that we do our due diligence to make sure that we, of course, are abiding by the procurement parameters and requirements. So, you know, of course, we'll do that due diligence and give and advise you. We have Diana Kerfoot, of course, from purchasing here, just to listen in, and, you know, because we're looking at getting into the procurement process shortly as we you know, look ahead. So, just wanted to kind of put that out there, make sure we're all aware of those requirements as well.
Right,
So-
I don't see this task force really get into the weeds of different RFP processes, but more not the trees, but really the forest, you know, looking at the landscape, looking at proposal, you know, changes as more holistically and seeing how it's going to affect people on the ground.
So that was going to be a question, and John hit on it. We do have RFPs coming up, and so we don't have a lot of time. So if this task force hopes to make fundamental changes that would affect the way we contract, just be aware that we do have RFPs and we are going to have a time commitment to meet certain things. The second thing on your committee, I came from a company that we had our own clinics we contracted with. We also had a partnership with El Rio. We've suggested that several times. We couldn't ever seem to get any traction for anybody to seriously look at that. So I think there are some real interesting opportunities. So good luck.
Yeah, and I missed what you said last, I'm still at work, but I would add that, you know, I think the timeline, I wonder if there's a way to, this is not a conversation for tonight per se, but just in my mind, just in terms of timeline and time frame, what we have time for and the research we need to do to make sure we do something bold that could be beneficial for our employee group, is to maybe, can we keep the current thing in place for another year and maybe even extend out the RFPs? We don't find some good options. I think it needs to be something that the EBT considers over the next year, whether, you know, we'll go off for RMP if everything's kind of just generic. I don't know if we want to make a 5-year commitment just yet, and whether we can extend things for another year or two with the current team, and then really look outside the box in terms of some different options. I see you kind of nodding, Diana, so hopefully that is an option that we can consider.
Yeah, I was going to say Rosie might know for sure. I mean, which ones are coming due for renewal. I mean, I'm not sure if we just are looking at it where we're in a contract and we just need to know, are we going to renew for another year, or are we ready to do a brand new RFP, you know, for like another, you know, longer term, you know, like the 5-year period or so. But yeah, I think we've got some time to look at the timelines and make a determination on what we can do. And if it's something that we would need to extend it, I think we would have the ability to do that.
Yes, just to confirm, the current contract that we have with UMR, it does expire at the end of the 24-25 plan year.
Okay.
Which is why we are talking RFP. However, with the help of our consultants, we probably will have options as far as maybe extending another year with UMR, or possibly even looking at a different carrier for just a year while we, you know, circle back as to what we want to do once we lock into another 5-year contract.
Okay. No, that's
great.
good.
Yeah, I'm a D and disc. I try to move fast, but I think we want to get this one right. We don't want to rush this at all.
Yeah.
And then, Dr. Shaw, the last thing I said is the company I came from, we had contracted to have our own clinics that saved a lot of money. We had partnered with El Rio. Both of those have been suggested here before, never got any traction. So I hope your committee will look at things like that, because I think there's huge benefit and convenience to the employees and cost savings.
Yeah, we went with the El Rio CEO last spring, as well as P3 Partners and some others. So I think there's a lot of things on the table that we can explore to see how we can provide the better care for our employee groups at a lower cost.
Okay, any questions or anything else on this topic?
just one more question. Just for clarity's purposes, thank you for the heads up, Dr. Shaw. Were you intending to move this at the next board meeting? That what we should expect, or is it was that the time frame you were thinking of?
This is an informational item, so I just wanted to give the group a heads up and also kind of explain that this isn't at all to replace the work of the EBT, but to really kind of supplement and really get the employee group input. I'm not sure what meeting is going to come up to. So last I heard, it might be end of February, early March. Though I talked to Dr. Trujillo today, and we're going to be hopefully approving some recommendations about employee benefits for the next fiscal year at the next meeting on the 13th. So I
Right.
suggested that might be a good time just to like put it all together into at the same time, so we can talk about our decision for the next fiscal year, as well as getting this task force next at the same time. So this might be on the next week's meeting potentially.
Okay, I just wanted to get clarity so that we could provide any further input prior to any final decision. Just whatever we find in our due diligence that we would like you to just be aware of, and we'll do that.
Okay, anything else on this item? Okay, so the next, Tom?
Yes, Mark, Valley is ready to go over the experience report now. We have Jameson on as well.
And Tom, we're on a pretty tight time frame. We've got some people that have other commitments, so if you could move right along, I would really appreciate it.
I can do that. Is someone gonna put that up? Or am I? Okay. Okay, tight time frames. This is the experience report through December. Currently running at an 85% loss ratio when you factor in the prescription drug rebates. That's good news. That's as brief as I can get. Any questions? We have silence.
Anything that you see might cause us grief by the end of the year, realizing you can't predict health conditions?
I haven't seen anything. Jameson, have you seen anything in the details?
No, I haven't really seen anything. The only thing I'm looking at, your pharmacy average monthly last year was 947, and now it's 1,035. So not that we're not seeing that in every other group. It's it's just a trend we're seeing, but that is one area that you've seen. You also at TUSD have seen some growth in costs.
But we're seeing that with all our groups, so.
Yeah.
So no, we can't predict the future, but we haven't seen anything on the horizon that we think is going to be big. But you don't know.
Okay, any questions or requests for more detail?
I can always have a question, and I can always have a meeting separately, so I'm not wasting everyone's time. But I just with the prescription drug rebates, and I don't know where that's coming from. As I'm new back to the committee here, so that might be something I can have another meeting on to make sure I understand that. Is that something we can foresee for the full school year, that we get these regularly, and is that budgeted when we make our plans for each fiscal year?
Yes, I mean, they come in quarterly. You never know what the federal government's going to do with such things, but yes, they're a regular payment. You get typically 4 payments a year. And we guess at what they'll be. Effectively, they've been going up in the last few years.
As your spend goes up, your rebates also increase. A lot of your rebates come from the specialty side, and as that continues to grow, so do your rebates.
And Jameson, as I recall, you do factor that in when you do our rates.
Yeah, we factor the estimated rebates. I am conservative. I think I took off like 10% of this current rebate, just to make sure, because you could lose some rebating pharmacy, and then all of a sudden that rebate goes down. I'd rather be conservative than aggressive.
This is set by the federal government. This is something that they set.
No, rebates are set by your PBM or your pharmacy benefit manager.
It's sort of the contract.
Yeah, it's a contract. What Tom's talking about is the government can always take that option of rebates away, making it more transparent. It just depends on what the federal government's talking about when it comes to pharmacy.
It's a discussion that came up as recently as Governor Hobbs talking about doing it in Arizona.
Yeah.
So it's just a discussion. You never know what's going to happen in the prescription drug world.
Dr. Shaw, we could get an agenda item at a future meeting and go in more depth if you want.
No, I'll defer to the rest of the group. If you all know this issue without spending meeting time, then I can have a separate conversation. But if people are in the same boat as I am and kind of unsure what this means and how this factors in and where this comes from, then we can definitely use EBT time.
I think it might be beneficial for just everybody starting out. You're going to start looking at alternatives. I think starting out with knowing what you have probably is not a bad idea. And I think we could do that rather briefly and provide time for questions and what have you.
So Monique, would you make a note to put this on the next agenda, please?
Yes, absolutely.
Okay, so the next item is the contribution strategy for the upcoming plan year. And I believe that's John and Ricky.
Yes, good evening. We have, I don't know if Rosie, you have the rate sheet, or do you want me to go ahead and share that?
Yeah, I can pull it up. Let me grab that here.
Okay. I think Dr. Shaw, had requested earlier to add the 23-24 rate as well, so that we could have a clear comparison. So I think this is just to recap. At our last meeting, we approved a recommendation, including the employer-employee share for the coming plan year, and this, of course, without a subsidy. And so, as you recall, even though we were looking at a 5% increase in total costs, the employee and employer reality is that they're going to be we're going to be experiencing a 9%, closer to a 9% increase without any further subsidy from prior years. So that's where we stand without the subsidy. We were asked, and I'll turn it over to Ricky at this point, asked to look and see where we stood with EBT reserves, and where in terms of our 6-month requirement. So I wanted to go ahead and maybe at this time turn it over to Ricky to kind of share his projection.
Yeah. Give me 1 second while I find that spreadsheet really quickly. Okay, so this is the that's loading. Are you guys able to see it yet? Oh, there it goes.
Yeah.
Yeah. John, can you see it?
Yes, I can see it. Can everybody see it? This
Yeah.
is called the recommendation.
Yeah, this is the subsidy recommendation that I provided to the governing board at their request in regards to looking at what the possibility might be to provide some funding in order to maintain the current premiums that both the district and the employees pay into the health plans. I took a look at the income that we had through the end of November, since that's what was reconciled at the time that I ran this. Took a look at the estimates that we're projecting and kind of an estimate of interest earned. So we're looking at just over $36.8 million in revenue coming in to EBT. Expenses, I mean, obviously this assumes that nothing crazy happens through the end of the fiscal year. About $38.2 million in claims and fixed expenses through the end of the fiscal year. So that runs a net loss of just shy of 1.4 million, which is, which sounds about right, because if you recall, the trust approved a subsidy this year of $1,043,469. So that shortfall is essentially being covered by cash that we have on hand. As of the 25th, which is the date that I ran this, January 25th, there was just over $23 million in cash sitting available in the trust, with a net loss of 1.396. We're looking at about $22.5 million, just shy of that, in cash estimated through the end of the fiscal year. Now, in talking to Tom over at Valley, the 6-month reserve policy amount is about $18 million, just under 18.1. So that leaves about $4.4 million available if all of this kind of works its way. Again, with claims, I mean, it's basically what we don't know that is really just the variable here. This assumed like a 10% increase, and we took a look at patterns over the last year, but obviously that changes year to year. So with the FY25 increase to the plan of 1,832,565, plus the ongoing subsidy of this year that was supposed to expire of just over $1 million, we're looking at a subsidy of just over $2.8 million from cash available in the trust to offset the increase for this year and obviously keep everything from last year so that employees continue to pay the same premiums that they currently pay as well as the district's premiums. The idea is to do this with the hope that the trust and the board eventually get to a point where they adopt or approve a new contractor, and then at that point, whatever the strategy is, it is what it is. But at least this creates predictability in the last year of the UMR contract. There was a request by the board at one point to see if we could do anything else. I told them that I would advise against depleting any more cash into this. This leaves about $1.6 million, between $1.5 million and $1.6 million cash on hand if all this holds true, which is a sufficient of a buffer. And, you know, in my estimation, just looking at what we've been doing in the last couple of years, to be able to cover any kind of just, you know, increases in any potential claims that come through. This doesn't account for any of the pharmacies subsidies that are going to coming through, you know, that might come through the end of the fiscal year, since, you know, those are handled by PBM, and I really couldn't necessarily find a pattern to those. So, I mean, that cash balance is certainly able to increase as the pharmacy benefit subsidy continues to come through. Or not subsidy, the rebates come through from CVS Caremark to be able to kind of increase the amount of cash we have on hand. So that's not included as part of this.
Ricky,
Yes, sir.
where does the IBNR reside? Because that's a large chunk of money and it's a commitment, you know, it's there. So where is that in these numbers? Where does the IBNR sit?
That's all in the claims and fixed expenses. I lumped everything in there.
Okay.
Okay. So, yeah, so the board asked me to come back to you all, take a look at the numbers with you, give you kind of my recommendation on moving forward with this, possibly as part of next week's presentation to the governing board on the rates, in addition to with an offset from cash on hand at the trust from the subsidy. We did remind the board, John and I, that, you know, this was the conversation we had a year ago. This was something that we weren't looking to do again. Obviously with, you know, an 8% increase because of subsidies that are currently in place, they felt like they wanted this to be explored. And so this is kind of where we're at now. Really, so, I mean, our recommendation is to approve the subsidy as presented, to offset the cost of F25, continue the fiscal year 24 amount that is currently in place, and then, you know, and then move forward with that to offset premiums for fiscal year 25 for employees and for the district. So I don't know if anybody has any other questions.
I've got a couple, Ricky, and I think Renee probably does too. Just so you're proposing a 1.8 million subsidy for the next plan year. Is that correct?
That's correct.
Okay. And have you projected out 2 or 3 years, because the hole just keeps getting bigger? You know, it was 5% increase, but without the subsidy, it's a 9% increase. Well, next year, we still got the 4% subsidy, and then we're adding an additional subsidy on top. So then the year after, the whole, instead of being 5%, is 5% plus now 12%. And I don't know what the number is. We're just letting people dig a deeper hole. And I lived through this in another company where one year we took a premium holiday, everybody, or a rate increase, no rate increase, everybody was ecstatic. The next year we had to do a double increase and everybody was going nuts. And this sounds to me like we're just letting people dig a deeper hole, and at some point it crashes. So if you projected and said, okay, if we do this year, this next year, then the next year you're looking at a 15% increase instead of a 9% increase. Are you ready to handle that?
Right. Yeah. So into the district's financials, I have put in this going away in fiscal year 26, plus adding up an inflator of 8% starting in 26, and then it just balloons from there. So from the district's perspective, we've included that. From the employees, I mean, unfortunately it is going to hit them, whatever that looks like. But I agree with you. This is the similar circumstance that, as you described it, as Pima County government is currently in. Their trust used a lot of their cash to try to kind of slow down the way that premiums were being passed on to the employees. And now they're having to double-digit increases, not because of premiums, but because their cash reserve is so low that they're having to make up for it. So we warned the board of this potential. You know, obviously we've been telling them that this is something that was going to come, right? Like this, at some point, we were going to have to figure out, how do we maintain this, or how do we get out of this, rather than not maintain it? How do we get out of it? You know, and really the only way to do it at this point is, you know, the ripping off of the Band-Aid, right? We explained it to them, like, look, it would be a 5% increase had it not been for the subsidy. The subsidy that's currently in place causes us to have a starting point that's much lower than where we would be. So that's why you've got an 8%. And you're right, you know, if there's one thing that Tom's taught me, is that the premiums aren't really going to be changing, because people are going to spend the way they spend based on claims, no matter who the provider is. So really, it's our fixed expenses that are really going to be the only thing that we get to manage, because that's really the only thing that's under our control. So that's a warning that we've had to the governing board. It's certainly a warning that I think John, as an EBT member, might be able to pass on. But yeah, I've projected an increase into the district's financials year over year for the next at least 5 years. So there's more coming.
Ricky, I disagree that the fixed cost is the only thing we control. We can make the plan less rich. If the district can't afford this plan, then we need to maybe go back and revise the plan and not make it so rich, and get it sized to where the district can afford it.
Yeah, I agree.
Yeah,
the pharmacy benefit is probably, you know, I've heard it, and listening to you all talk about it, is top tier. And I know obviously the cost of drugs is just incredible. But yeah, I think there are different layers that can be affected, and I think the board wanted to explore if we want to do this, since this is a good time, since this is the final year of UMR, with the hope that eventually the trust will, you know, recommend a new plan provider, and then that would be a fresh start. That would be a breaking point to say, we're starting from here because the plan is different, the provider might be different, or the provider might be the same, but the plan is different because you all decide that the benefits need to look different. So there are variables in there that would at least justify to the public and to the employees that, look, you know, we've kind of ripped the Band-Aid with this provider, and we're moving on here, because this is a 5-year that we're in it. So, but it's ultimately all what you want to do, Mark. I mean, that you guys are the trustees, so it's whatever you feel comfortable doing moving forward.
Renee?
So the $1.8 million additional that you're asking for to cover this year, does that cover a 0 increase to TUSD and the employee for the 25 benefit year?
Yes.
So basically, nobody's kicking in any more money except the trust for another year.
Right.
And we did have this exact conversation last year, because I remember I asked, this is really going to hurt next year when you kick in the increase in addition to removing the subsidy, because we worked for about 5 years to take that subsidy away. So the trust was no longer subsidizing premiums. And then boom, it came right back.
Yeah, and I kind of, I don't know, I can't see him, but I kind of wish that Dr. Ravi was here. He might have additional perspective from the board side that I'm not necessarily advocating, but Renee, you're right. We had this conversation and we passed that message on to the board to make them aware of the fact that this was gonna be an issue. And it will be an issue. If you decided to do this or not do it, there's a reckoning coming, right?
Ricky, sorry to interrupt everyone, but I just got notification that the actual publication of tonight's agenda did not save with the actual 6.02. Mark, you have it on your agenda that went to you. However, the publishing for tonight's meeting did not include the discussion of the district requesting contributions from the EBT committee. I just spoke with Yolanda, and because of it not being published on the agenda, there really cannot be a vote on that today either way. So the direction I'm getting is that we will have to get it on an emergency basis onto the agenda on board docs. And even if it's a brief meeting where the committee comes together to make that recommendation as to what you all decide, we will have to get back together on that particular item. I do apologize for that. It was just brought to my attention that that agenda item was not published in board docs.
So the one that I have on the agenda I received says contribution strategy. That's not on board docs.
We do have the contribution strategy. But Yolanda, are you on? Because is that not something that we can put into that particular agenda item? The discussion of the contribution strategy, because it is listed under an action item.
And that's what I thought we were talking about.
And it is it is related to that.
If that's all part of that item, then yes, you can do a vote on this. But if it's a total separate item, then you would not be able to take any action on it. It would have to be a different item. But if it's the same thing, you can go ahead and take action on it.
Okay.
Yeah, I think it's the same thing. Renee, John, do you have any reservations?
Are we all in agreement it falls under that category still? I mean, it is part of the discussion. It is listed as study and action. So if you all are okay with it, then we can definitely continue and move forward with that.
I mean, if I could say for the record, the contribution strategy is the discussion of what the employer and employee are going to be contributing, right, as part of their share of the premium.
Okay.
The question of whether a subsidy is going to be recommended will impact that contribution strategy. So I would think it's germane to this subject.
Okay.
Unless that's just my opinion, Mark.
So, Ricky, you said that I thought I heard you said that you had projected out, okay, we do this year, the next year it's going to be even bigger. Have you projected out how far you would estimate before it's, we have to change the rules, change the contribution policy, that the trust just runs out of money to do this?
In regards to when it runs out of money, no. Because you all have a policy that requires you to always have 6 months worth.
Well, I meant run out of money above our contribution.
I mean, above that, if Well, that'll depend because we know what we know today, right? So if premiums are gonna shift again, and we maintain the same level of, the plans, I mean, potentially there's gonna be, probably around the $2 to $4 million excess cash available if the plan is gonna maintain the same level of premiums and the plan itself isn't gonna change. But again, because you're all going into an RFP year, not knowing what all of the variables are that are gonna go into it, it's difficult to project what what excess cash you're gonna have above the 6-month strategy.
I can tell you just from experience that the RFP year doesn't really change anything. I mean, we never, I've been doing this for like 30 years and I've never seen an RFP bring in a carrier that was significantly lower. I mean, you might see some savings the first year, especially in your fixed costs or plan designs, but those are gonna, level out year 2. And even in a self-insured environment, a fully insured environment, yeah, you can bring somebody in very low and then year 2 see those increases. I don't think that the RFP has a lot of bearing on the trust balances going forward. I do think that you can project the next 3 to 5 years what that balance is going to look like. We've done that over the past few years in the trust when we were trying to burn down the balance. Keeping that 6 to 8 months, not just of claims expense, but all the expenses, right? The PCORI fees, all those fixed expenses have to be included in that as well. And I think that $2 million is not much. Like that's some NICU visit, some preemie babies, a couple of bad cancers, a transplant, that's gone. I mean, that is not a cushion. And I've seen that happen. I've seen that happen in a year where you get those things. So, I mean, I guess for me, I'd really want to see the projections of what that trust balance might look like if we subsidized again. And here's my second fear: as long as we keep saying, sure, we'll subsidize, the board's going to keep coming back and asking. Nobody's ever going to, they're going to keep kicking that can down the road. And the employees are never going to be able to afford for that subsidy to go away, and then the trust is going to run out of money, and everything's going to be in bad shape. So I mean, I would tell you that I couldn't vote on this item tonight. Like, I would really want to see some real numbers of what we think that trust balance is going to project out in the coming years if we do this, and then I'd want to see reality what we're looking at next year with another 5 to 7% increase, which is just annual trend. 5 to 7% a year is just basic, in addition to the subsidy amounts.
And then I may be dreaming, but it seems like in the last meeting or two, Jameson and Tom talked about the healthcare with COVID and what happened. The hospital systems kind of got locked up, haven't been able to pass through their true increases, and now contracts are coming due. That the new RFPs are going to be painful because the medical system's trying to catch up. Now, maybe I dreamt that or read that someplace else, but I remember hearing that.
Yeah, Mark, I'm going to let Jameson speak to that because, yeah, we did say that. I did want to comment on Renee's comments. I agree with what she's saying. An RFP process is not going to produce some large decrease in your costs. It's just, I've never seen that happen. There's certainly things you can do to try and lower costs, but it's a strategy I'd be careful of. With that, Jameson, you want us to talk to the hospital contracts?
Yeah, so well, we're actually seeing it right now with Blue Cross Blue Shield and Dignity. Dignity just left the Blue Cross network, or Blue Cross just left Dignity out of their network, which is a huge impact for those that have Blue Cross. You guys are lucky enough to be with United Healthcare, but they couldn't come to terms. And I didn't, last time I got numbers, but I did not get percentages of how much Dignity wants and an increase overall cost. But we're going to start seeing that more and more. I'm seeing it just across the board with the carriers and these hospital systems. And Mark, you're right. What I was referring to is their contracts are, 2 to 3 years. They've had years of inflation and really had the opportunity to get that inflation corrected in their contracts. So they're going pretty hard at the carriers to try to get as much as they can to correct that. And so we're going to see that in our claims as we go forward with the new contracts. Longer stays or more expensive stays, larger claims as our healthcare continues to trend forward.
If I can just add really quick, I need to get off the call completely in 5 minutes. I'm almost at my event. So I think that the issue of keep on coming back to the trust for this year after year is going to be mute once we're at the 6 months. And I see my philosophy is I see anything above the 6 month is an overcharge of premiums. And all we're doing is giving that premium money back by not increasing the premiums for the next year. We're not giving a refund. We're just not increasing premiums because anything we need to have over 6 months. And if we have more than 6 months, or we need to have 6 months of costs in our bank, and every penny above that is that we've charged too much premiums, and that's over that 6 month cushion helps with like any increased cost, a neonatal visit or a cancer or a surgical outcome or bad accident, and that 6 month cushion helps with that. And anything above that is just overcharging the premiums or I use the word miscalculation at a meeting, and Ricky bombasted me for that, but like actuarially, like we estimate premiums coming in and expenses going out, and everything above 6 months is at is more on the money coming in. And so once we're at the 6 months, we can't come back. Like we're at the requirement in terms of what we need. And this isn't something, and I understand the whole decay down the road. I totally understand the financial of it's going to be more in the future. But if we're at above 6 months, like why do we have more money than we need as an organization, as an EPT?
So, Dr. Shaw, there's a couple of comments to that. We carry $1 million stop loss, and we're able to do that because we have some cushions. So we'd have to change our expenses. I would think we'd need to lower our stop loss significantly, and that would add hundreds of thousands of dollars of expense, which, we could build that in. Then is the district prepared? So we target 6 months. We have preemie twins, which we had like a year ago, a couple of other serious things. Is the district prepared, instead of them asking us for a subsidy, us saying, okay, we're below the contribution level, you guys need to kick in money to us? That's if the governing board and the district are prepared to go both ways on this, we can target the 6 month. And if we go under and they're prepared to reverse the flow of cash, then we could do that. So it has allowed this trust to do some things. We got asked to add gender affirming care mid-year, no cost increases. We added that because we had some reserves. Those kinds of things, we'd lose that flexibility. And if that's the direction the governing board and the district want this trust to go, to run right on the edge, then we can go that way.
Well, I'll just speak for myself that I understand the finances and consequences. I think Ricky and John making sure that the rest of the governing board understands that as well is going to be really important if the governing board does decide to go down this route. And with that, I need to jump off, and I apologize for not being able to stay the rest of the meeting, but thank you. Okay.
So, John and Ricky, I guess what I would like to see, and I think it's what Renee requested, is could you guys work with Tom and Jameson and project out that, okay, next year, where we think we'd be at, and if we did another subsidy, how long before we'd hit the 6 month contribution wall? Is that, a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years? And then talk about recommendations on language changes. Maybe our contribution strategy needs to be modified to say, you know, we'll target the 6 month. If we drop below that, the governing board and the district agree to do a true up and bring that up to the 6 month level at the end of the year. And that becomes part of the contribution strategy that's been, and it's agreed to by the governing board and the district.
I mean, yeah, we can work on providing you with you know, the projections. It's gonna be pretty quick. I mean, before you hit that 6 month mark. I mean, you're at 4 mil now. I believe we were, you know, closer to like the high 5 million last year. And with an 8%, you know, with a 5% increase, if we just compound that over the next several years, we're probably talking pretty soon, but we can definitely get you something that trues everything up and shows you kind of where we would need to be. And then you all can make decisions on a policy change for 6 months. Is that something that is continuing to be realistic? And that might inform how you do plan design in an RFP. I mean, not that it's going to make, I'm not ignorant to the fact that I know the RFP makes little to no difference from a bottom line perspective, but I understand that plan design certainly can. And so if that's going to inform the decisions that you all make in regards to how you want to set your fund balance policy, then we should, you know, that should be informed once you have a policy selection in place. I wouldn't necessarily make a recommendation to you all to make a policy change adverse to something that is unknown. The other thing is, and John, correct me if I'm wrong, but then based on what I'm hearing now, then the presentation to the governing board next week would be reflective of an 8% increase to the premiums, right, John? Unless.
Yeah, I mean, as a member of the trust, I mean, I think those are the things I'd like to kind of just clarify, Ricky. The board is scheduled to review the EBT recommendation that was made earlier with the 9%, 8%, you know, increase. But at the same time, I know that board members have been asking for the information regarding what remains in the reserves. And I'm not going to speak for the board or for Dr. Shaw, because it wasn't either of them, either Dr. Shaw or in the board discussion. It was really questions on the side about how much is in the reserve. Do we think we can subsidy? So it's going to be on the minds of the board when we get to the presentation. And then even with the call to the audience last week, there was, I mean, at the last board meeting, and I would expect more of the same, possibly, of employees talking about, you know, the cost of the premiums they're having today, right? Those cost of premiums already on any of the compensation increases and pay adjustments that have occurred recently. So there is going to be, I would expect, some discussion of what subsidy solutions are available. So for the EBT, I guess we're in a position of either, you know, of making a recommendation of some sort. My question is, if we don't endorse a subsidy, does the board have the authority to act unilaterally? Ricky, do you know?
I believe they do. I kind of defer to Rob. It wouldn't be good if they did, because the trustees, I mean, are trusteeship for a reason.
Well, I'd want to clarify that, but I think that's kind of from as an EBT member, you know, we are discussing whether or not to, you know, we would recommend a subsidy prior to the possible action of the board to approve the benefits package on the 13th. And as far as the subsidy is concerned, can you just confirm, Ricky, the last 2 years of subsidy, what were the sources of those subsidies?
So the current one that we've got in place is excess cash in the trust. And then the prior ones were coming from ESSER.
Now that excess cash that was in the trust, was that what was that the result of?
I mean, that's a variable, but one of the things that, that I would correct Dr. Shaw on is, you know, the rebates that we earned, that we earn are, those come through how CVS sends them through, right? They come in the form of cash, but those have an effect on the bottom line. I mean, if those go away, it's one thing. I mean, in the last several years, we've been doing really well on interest revenue. I mean, such as large trust, and that's not going to continue here, pretty soon, because my understanding is that's interest rates are going to start coming back down in the spring. So that's not necessarily something that we need to look forward to or that we want to. So those are two particular variables. And then and one of the things that we did discover is there was kind of a double charge on the admin rate for the health savings account plans that for some reason was in the fixed expense, was also being charged to the various funds that pay for the individual employees' HSAs or their plans. And so that kind of double dipping, if you will, was something that we stopped, but that ended up just being cash. And so it was a windfall. And I mean, in the full definition of it, in the fact that we've discovered it, that hole is plugged, that windfall isn't there, right? The windfall in quotes that we're experiencing now is revenues that we're earning outside of the premiums that we're collecting, really.
But I guess based on last year, it wasn't really a decision for the trust to contribute to the subsidy necessarily. I mean, it really was a correction to the premiums that have been charged and were doubly charged and that made sense to reimburse, right?
Yeah, that one was more just giving it back, but nevertheless, I mean, it shaved off the top. I mean, for all intents and purposes, it did exactly what Renee was describing. So, I mean, whether it was a correction or not, yeah.
I just feel like at this point, the EBT's got to, we're kind of facing a slightly different situation where we've got to make a determination of whether or not our 7.5 months reserve, which is I think where we're at, right? Whether we're willing to contribute a portion of that to offset the cost to employee. And as Renee pointed out, what the recommendation is at this point is 100% offset, which would bring us down to about a 6.5 month reserve if we did 100% offset to the employer and employee. So I get the concern because it is kind of, it is on the edge of that reserve requirement. So I understand the concern of the trust, but at the same time, that's why I was wondering whether the board would move unilaterally and could you move unilaterally to make a determination about the subsidy, or whether we have to take an action in order to.
I think that I'd love to hear Rob weigh in on it, because I believe that the trust was created to manage the fiduciary responsibility of the funds. And I don't know that the board, without dissolving the trust, has the ability to do that. But that's a Rob question for sure.
Yeah, I think that was something I would want to be very clear on too.
Well, it may be that you just need new trustees that will just rubber stamp this stuff, and I'm more than willing to turn my resignation in if that'll help.
No. I would say no.
We won't ever be able to replace anyone. Yeah, no, I just want to clarify that just from the standpoint of contextual, situation. We're asked to make a recommendation, but again, the question is it, with the board taking action unilaterally? If not, then maybe we have another opportunity to just kind of consider, look at the projections and consider options. But ultimately, I think we're in a position that we can make a recommendation one way or the other.
John, at the end of the day, just so you know where I'm coming from, it's never been our intent to gather money and just grow this thing. We've had these discussions for a long time about how to trend down, but to get a soft landing, not a crash landing. And at the end of the day, if the district absolutely wants us to do 100% subsidy, I'm willing to support that with one caveat. A year from now, when it's like, instead of like, oh, it's now 15%, not 9%. We need more money out of you. Maybe we could do it one more time, but then it's like, oh, it's 25% and you don't have any money. What the hell do we do now? Excuse the French. And I just want to make sure we're trying to, we don't want to have excess funds, but we don't want to run into a cliff by dispersing them too fast. But if if the district and the board are that adamant that they've got to have that money to make it work, I can do it as long as they understand the ramifications. And, I don't know that they really do, because they've been able to each year kick the can another year. And maybe it goes indefinitely. Maybe the RFP is great and we generate a bunch of cash and we can keep doing this. But I'm just,
No, I agree with you. I agree with you. I think, ultimately we kick it down one more year. That's probably the furthest we're going to be able to kick it. And then somebody's going to have to make a decision. And it's going to be the trust looking at maybe significant design changes that, like you said, may bring it back to a bit more affordable, plan design, or, we're short, any subsidy options, and the board just has to, move forward with double-digit increases. I mean, we're going to be in that situation in a year. Even if we continue to subsidize, that's unavoidable. Yeah.
I mean, I guess I still would like to see what this looks like with some projections, because I mean, I think we can't discount Mark's point, and I'd love to hear Valley Schools weigh in with their expertise. We can't maintain $1 million stop loss if we're running right on the cusp of our 6-month expense. And per our trust document, we have to have between 6 and 8 months. That's the sweet spot. We're not supposed to go a whole lot higher than 8
Right.
months, but we absolutely cannot drop below the 6. And we can't do that with $1 million stop loss. I mean, there's no way. So what are those premiums going to cost? Because those are going to have to be added into that 6-month cost number. And so I think that this is a bigger conversation than just, hey, can we have another 2 point whatever $million? I think it's bigger than that. And I'd like to see some options. Do we have to subsidize 100%? I feel for the employee cost, I mean, deeply, because I've lived that with you guys, and I get it, but I think we're doing everybody a disservice by kicking that can down the road and making the pain that much bigger a year from now, a year from now, a year from now. And we don't. I keep hearing you say the trust will have to, change the plan designs. We work off the recommendations that the district brings us. And I don't hear the district bringing us anything other than, hey, we just don't have enough money to cover what we have. Bring us some options, bring us some plan design changes, bring us some things to look at.
John, what do you think would happen if we propose to do half the subsidy, not the full subsidy, and with the caveat that then we have the coming year to get really down and dirty on the projections and changes to our subsidy document that would reflect what happens if we drop below this 6 months? What action does that trigger? And that we would then come back and ask for approval of that.
Well, sorry about that, Mike. I guess I was going, it doesn't look like we might be comfortable taking a vote tonight, but is there is there a possibility, Rosie, under, like you said, emergency scheduling of a meeting, another meeting before the 13th, so we can gather this information and make sure we've provided that to the trust?
John, I'm available every evening between now and the 13th.
And I'm looking at whether it's Friday or can we do is a Friday or a Monday possible?
We
How about
can look,
you?
we
How
can look
about
at
you,
that. I guess part of the question on that is, with Valley, Jameson and Tom, is that something that we're gonna be able to come together and get those projections together to have ready? Something to keep in mind is even with an emergency meeting, we do need time to get these into board docs and published. They do have to be published for the public prior to a scheduled meeting. So right now, the earliest we would be looking at would be Thursday or the following Monday.
I would say Monday is too late because that Tuesday.
Right, we need all the information to the governing board before then. Yolanda, you need whatever information is being presented to governing board by Wednesday, the latest, Wednesday this week, correct?
Well, Thursday the latest for any attachments or anything I would need to have in.
Okay.
So, I mean, Friday would be the absolute latest, but it would have to be like noon Friday because Dr. Trujillo reviews the agenda before I'm able to feature the agenda for the public.
Okay,
To answer Rosie's question, I think we could crank out projections pretty quick. So I think if you schedule a meeting for as soon as you can all get it scheduled, I don't think there's a problem with us putting together some projections, and we'll what if some things. What if claims do this? What if claims do that? Because we know what trends are. And over time, you're going to be trend. That we know. So it should be
Yeah,
pretty.
I think Rosie, one of those items would be the projections, as Tom's discussing.
right.
I think maybe could we cost out different scenarios in terms of different different subsidy levels for employer and employee. Is that something, Ricky, that you could look at? Or I mean the breakdown between the employee and an employer, and if the EBT didn't go 100% but went 75% or some, could we look at that breakout? Or
Yeah, I mean, it's essentially like, I mean, I can give you the split and what it is for 75%.
what's the split right between the employer and employee share of the?
It varies by plan and it varies by level. So the amounts are different. But right now, the way it's the current subsidy is 100% covers the employee and 50% of the district's increase. So that's essentially what this would be doing, is only covering half of what the district's increase would be, and then the other part would be the employees, but we'd still be spending the same amount of money, which my understanding is a concern. So I think looking at the projections that Tom and Jameson and Elvis can put together are going to be, they're going to be better than anything that I can provide, because ultimately that trend analysis is really what you need. Cash is going to do what it does, and how you apply the trend analysis to cash.
And I'm happy to go check in with Rob Ross and inform the trust regarding the trust action and authority on this.
So Renee and John and Tom and Jameson and Ricky, could we be ready for 5 o'clock Thursday?
Sure.
And I want to make sure that we've got the correct topics down so we don't run into a meeting violation. So we're looking for projections on subsidy amounts and when it becomes, when the trust can no longer provide subsidies because we run into the 6-month wall. I think, John, I thought I heard you say, and I misinterpreted it. What is the trust and the governing board? What's the relationship? And can the governing board just overrule us? Which, I mean, if that's the way it is, that's the way it is. But we probably ought to understand that. So And you guys may need to know when you have the meeting the next week, if that comes up, then you'll know the answer to that. I thought I had one other one, but I sure can't think of it. Anything else you can think of, Renee?
No, I think for me, I just really want to see some numbers. If I to make this decision, I'd like to see some numbers that show we're not gonna hurt the trust if we try to do something like that. I will tell you, I have serious concerns because I know what that increase is going to do to the employees again next year. And so, you know, where you're looking at under $50, worst case scenario per paycheck this time, which is horrible. I'm not saying that's good. You're looking at close to $100 next year. I know. And that's my fear. We're doing the employees a huge disservice. I mean, it feels like a good thing. I get that, but it is not. It is not. That's a concern for me, definitely.
I
And
know
that
that,
stop loss, I'm really worried about that. I think Mark makes a valid point around the stop loss.
and that was the third item. Jameson and Tom, if you could just, you know, say the stop loss ought to go to this amount if you're going to, you know, get your reserves down to that level. And I think you guys have enough experience. You could say that would add X, you know, X amount that we'd need to add into expenses. That would be the third thing, is just your thoughts on what this would do to stop loss.
Sounds good.
You know, and it's really sad because 3 or 4 years ago, we were talking about using all of that excess funds to do and like internal clinics and to bring some of that in and start building that out. And that never happened. And now it's just, you know, getting wiped away.
And
We did
John
see,
and
we saw this
Ricky-
coming, yes, the last couple of years, I know, for
Yeah.
sure. So I agree with you, Renee.
And John and Rick, I just, again, we want to support the district. We don't want to be obstructionist or anything, but we are trying to balance our fiduciary responsibility and anyway, so.
Yeah, no, and I mean, everything you're all saying is stuff that are items that I've advised the board on, to be cognizant of the fact that this is just kind of, you know, keeping the inevitable from happening. You know, what Renee mentioned is exactly what is potentially gonna happen. And so that affects the other side of the compensation formula, right? Because then if we come forward with a compensation plan for the board on people's salaries that is then eaten up by health insurance, we've really done nothing, right? And we're doing a disservice. And at some point, somebody's just gotta have to make like the difficult decision to say no to something. You know, I can make it ugly, but somebody's gotta say that it is, and that's not me. So I think the information that Tom and Jameson can provide is gonna give you a better picture than what I can. Like I said, they're gonna give you the projection on trends and everything. Cash is gonna do what cash does. You know, I'm just laying it on top of that. So they're gonna be in a better position to tell you what we're looking at.
Okay, Tom and Jameson, do you need any further information, or are you guys ready to go?
I think I know the assignment. I will ask John and Ricky to commit to we'll schedule some type of meeting for late tomorrow, because I'm hoping we can get this done right away tomorrow. I don't know what the schedule looks like, but I want to get it done, and so we can talk about it before we bring it to the board. So, but I think I understand the assignment.
I apologize, my dogs are going crazy, so. Give me 1 second. Okay, I apologize about that. So anything else on this topic? And so the next agenda item is the future meeting dates. And right now, the next meeting is Thursday. And Monique, if you would put an agenda item, future meeting dates again, then we can set the next regular scheduled meeting at the end of the day, at the end of the meeting Thursday.
Okay, sounds good.
And Monique, I will watch for that agenda and get it approved, you know, quickly as soon as you get it to me.
Yeah, Rosie and I will work on that tomorrow.
Okay.
Okay, sounds good.
And with that, unless there's any other questions or comments, I'm looking for a motion to adjourn the meeting.
I move that we adjourn tonight's meeting.
I second.
All in favor? Aye.
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 And I think I did say 5 o'clock. Does that work for John and Renee and
That's fine.
Yes.
Jameson and Tom? Sorry, I'm being discourteous to the rest of you. I'm assuming we can make it work for everybody, so.
So 5 o'clock on Thursday.
Okay. Thanks, everybody. Appreciate it.
Thanks, Mark.
Thank you.
Thank
Okay,
you.
bye.
Thanks, everyone.